The transport shuttle shook as it entered the atmosphere of Kepler 442b. Dr. Minji Park pressed her face against the small window and watched the alien research station grow larger below. The massive structure looked like a metal flower blooming from the rocky surface of the distant planet. Silver panels reflected the light from the system's twin suns. Minji had traveled for 3 months to reach this place. She was only 28 years old, but already known as one of the best xenobiologists in human space. Before studying alien life, she had worked as a trauma counselor helping soldiers recover from war. Now she would study the most dangerous creature anyone had ever found. The shuttle landed with a soft bump. Minji gathered her equipment bags and stepped out onto the landing platform. The air smelled strange here. It was breathable for humans, but had a metallic taste that made her nose wrinkle. 3 alien figures waited to greet her. The first alien looked like it was made of living crystal. Its body caught the sunlight and threw rainbows across the platform. This was Veltar from the Crystalline Collective. Veltar spoke through a translation device that made its voice sound like wind chimes. "Welcome, Dr. Park. I am the lead researcher on this project. We have studied the creature for 237 years. The second alien was harder to see. It looked like a cloud of purple gas held together in a clear container suit. This was Thum from the Gaseous Federation. When Thum spoke, the gas swirled faster inside its suit. The behavioral patterns remain unchanged. The creature shows extreme hostility to all approaches. 3 researchers have died. 17 others were injured." The third alien made Minji think of a giant ant walking on 2 legs. Its black shell gleamed and its 4 arms moved constantly. This was Crix from the Insectoid Republic. Crix clicked and buzzed when it talked. "Medical intervention impossible. The creature attacks any medical personnel. Its wounds remain untreated for decades." Minji nodded to each of them. "Thank you for bringing me here. I have read all the reports. Tell me about the creature's current condition." Veltar's crystal body flashed brighter. "We call it the Sovereign. It is 12 feet tall and weighs approximately 800 pounds. Its natural armor can deflect most energy weapons. It has killed the apex predators on 3 different worlds. They walked through the station's corridors. The walls were lined with screens showing data about the Sovereign. Heart rate monitors showed a steady rhythm. Brain scans revealed complex activity patterns. Temperature readings showed the creature ran hotter than most life forms. "How did you capture it?" Minji asked. Thum's gas swirled more slowly. "We did not capture it. 37 years ago, we found it injured on the planet's surface. It was unconscious and near death. We brought it here to save its life." "And it has been here ever since?" Crix's mandibles clicked together rapidly. "Correct. The creature recovered from its original injuries but sustained new ones fighting our medical teams. It refuses all treatment. It sits in its habitat and watches us." They reached the observation deck. Through thick, transparent walls, Minji could see into a large habitat. Artificial trees and rocks made it look like a natural environment. In the center sat the Sovereign. Minji had seen pictures, but nothing prepared her for the real thing. The Me creature was massive and clearly built for hunting. Its dark scales looked like natural armor. Long arms ended in clawed hands that could tear through metal. Its head was large and intelligent eyes watched everything around it. But what struck Minji most were the wounds. Gashes across its arms and legs had healed incorrectly. A deep cut on its side looked infected. Burns on its back formed twisted scars. The creature could have healed properly with medical care, but instead it seemed to maintain these injuries on purpose. "The wounds looked deliberate," Minji said. Veltar's crystals dimmed. "We believe the creature keeps itself injured as some form of psychological response to captivity. Have any humans tried to approach it before?" "Yes. 3 human researchers were assigned here over the past 15 years. All requested transfer after brief encounters. They said the creature made them uncomfortable in ways they could not explain." Minji studied the Sovereign more carefully. As she watched, it seemed to notice her attention. The great head turned slowly in her direction. For a moment, their eyes met through the barrier. Minji felt something she had not expected. The creature's gaze was not hostile or angry. It was sad. "Interesting," she whispered. What do you observe? Crix asked. The creature is not just intelligent, it's mourning something. Thume's gas shifted to a darker purple. Mourning? How can you determine this? I worked with trauma victims before becoming a xenobiologist. I recognize the signs. This creature is carrying psychological wounds along with the physical ones. The Sovereign continued to watch her. Its breathing was slow and steady. The monitors showed its heart rate had decreased slightly since she arrived at the observation window. Hyunwoo Kim approached from behind them. He was the station's human communications officer and had worked there for 2 years. He was a thin man with worried eyes who always seemed nervous around the alien researchers. Dr. Park, I'm Hyunwoo Kim. I'll be your human liaison during your stay. I should warn you about getting too close to that thing. I've seen what it can do. What exactly have you seen? Last year, Crix tried to use a medical drone to treat its wounds. The Sovereign crushed the drone with its bare hands. The year before that, Veltar attempted to use sonic therapy. The creature roared so loudly, it cracked the observation windows. Minji nodded but continued watching the Sovereign. The creature had not looked away from her. If anything, it seemed more alert now. Its head tilted slightly as if it was studying her as much as she was studying it. Has it shown this level of interest in other observers? Hyunwoo shook his head. Never. Usually it ignores us completely or shows signs of aggression. This is different. The Sovereign slowly stood up. All the researchers stepped back from the observation window except Minji. The creature was even more impressive standing at full height. But instead of showing threatening behavior, it simply moved closer to the transparent barrier. It stopped, just a few feet away, and sat down again. Remarkable, Veltar chimed. The creature has never voluntarily approached the observation area. Its vital signs remain stable, Crix reported while checking a handheld scanner. No indication of aggressive intent. The Sovereign raised one massive hand and placed it against the transparent wall. The gesture was almost gentle. Minji found herself stepping closer to the barrier. She raised her own hand and placed it against the wall opposite the creature's palm. For a long moment they stayed like that. Human and alien apex predator separated by inches of transparent material, but somehow connected. Minji felt something she could not explain. A sense of recognition, as if she was looking at something familiar in an unexpected place. Then the Sovereign pulled its hand back and returned to the center of its habitat. But it continued to watch her with those intelligent and sorrowful eyes. I think, Minji said, quietly, that this creature has been waiting for something. Or someone. Waiting for what? Thume asked. I don't know yet. But I intend to find out. 3 days had passed since Minji arrived at the research station. She spent most of her time in the observation deck watching the Sovereign. The massive creature seemed to know when she was there. Even when it appeared to be sleeping, it would open one eye to check if she was at the window. Minji reviewed all the research files in her quarters each night. The reports painted a picture of a creature that defied understanding. The Sovereign had been found bleeding and unconscious 37 years ago. Medical scans showed it had been in multiple battles across different star systems. Some wounds were fresh while others were decades old. What puzzled Minji most was how the creature maintained its injuries. Every attempt at medical treatment resulted in violent resistance, but the wounds never got worse. Somehow the Sovereign was keeping them at exactly the right level to remain visible but not life-threatening. It's like it wants to remember something painful, she told Hyunwoo. Over breakfast in the station cafeteria, Hyunwoo pushed his food around his plate nervously. Dr. Park, I really think you should be careful. That thing has killed researchers before. The alien medical teams won't even enter the same section of the station when it gets aggressive. Tell me about your background, Hyunwoo. What did you do before coming here? I was a communications specialist in the human military for 8 years. I served on 3 different worlds during the border conflicts with the Zilani Empire. After I left the service, I needed somewhere quiet to work. Minji nodded thoughtfully. So you understand combat and military thinking? I suppose so. Why does that matter? I'm beginning to think the Sovereign isn't just an apex predator. I think it's a warrior. And warriors follow different rules than ordinary creatures. That afternoon, Minji made a decision that shocked everyone on the station. She requested permission to enter the corridor that led to the Sovereign's habitat. Not just the observation area, but the actual entrance to the creature's living space. Veltar's crystal body flashed red with alarm. "Dr. Park, that is absolutely forbidden. The creature will attack you instantly. We cannot allow such risk." "The safety protocols exist for good reason," Crix added, while its mandibles clicked rapidly. "3 researchers have died attempting direct contact." Thume's purple gas swirled frantically inside its containment suit. "The behavioral data shows 100% aggression toward direct approach attempts. Survival probability is essentially 0. But Minji had studied the old reports more carefully than anyone else. "I've read every incident report. The researchers who died were all trying to force medical treatment or take biological samples. They approached the Sovereign as if it was a specimen to be studied." "That is correct," Veltar confirmed. "Standard xenobiological research protocols were followed." "What if the standard protocols are wrong for this particular creature?" Haiyan Wu looked worried. "Dr. Park, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that the Sovereign doesn't see itself as a research subject. It sees itself as something else entirely, maybe even as a prisoner of war." The idea sent shockwaves through the research team. For over 200 years they had approached the Sovereign as scientists studying an interesting specimen. The possibility that it viewed their relationship differently had never occurred to them. Minji spent the next 2 days observing the Sovereign's behavior patterns more closely. She noticed things that previous researchers had missed. The creature maintained a daily routine that looked almost military in its precision. It exercised at the same time each day. It inspected its habitat boundaries systematically. It even seemed to stand guard during certain hours. "It's not pacing randomly," she explained to the team. "It's patrolling. This creature thinks it's on duty." On the 6th day of her stay, Minji made her move. She put on a simple jumpsuit instead of the medical equipment previous researchers had worn. She carried no tools or scanning devices. She walked slowly to the entrance of the Sovereign's habitat and stood before the sealed door. "Dr. Park, please reconsider," Veltar pleaded through the comm system. "The moment that door opens, the creature will attack." "I don't think it will," Minji replied calmly. "But if I'm wrong, at least we'll learn something new." She placed her hand on the door control. Through the internal cameras, she could see the Sovereign in the center of its habitat. The massive creature was sitting quietly, but its head was turned toward the entrance. It knew she was there. Minji opened the door. The Sovereign did not move. It watched her step into the habitat but showed no signs of aggression. Minji walked slowly toward the center of the large space. Her heart was beating fast, but she kept her movements calm and deliberate. When she was about 20 feet away, the Sovereign stood up. Minji stopped walking and waited. The creature was even more impressive, up close. Its dark scales caught the artificial sunlight and its intelligent eyes studied her carefully. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Then, the Sovereign did something unprecedented. It nodded once, a small gesture of acknowledgement from one warrior to another. "Hello," Minji said quietly. "My name is Minji. I think you've been waiting a long time for someone to treat you with proper respect." The Sovereign tilted its massive head slightly. It seemed to be listening not just to her words but to something deeper. The tone of her voice perhaps, or the way she held herself without fear. Minji took a small step closer. The Sovereign allowed it. She took another step, and then another. Soon she was close enough to see the details of the creature's scars. Each wound told a story of battle and sacrifice. These were not random injuries. They were honorable scars earned in combat. "You're not just a predator," she said softly. "You're a guardian, aren't you? You fought to protect others." The Sovereign's breathing changed slightly. Its great chest rose and fell in what might have been a sigh. For the first time since its capture, the creature seemed to relax. Through the comm system, Minji could hear the excited chatter of the research team. Vital signs were stable. No aggressive postures were detected. The impossible was happening. A human was having peaceful contact with the galaxy's most dangerous predator. Minji reached slowly toward one of the wounds on the Sovereign's arm. The creature watched her hand approach but did not pull away. When her fingers touched the edge of the scar, the Sovereign's eyes closed briefly. Not from pain, but from something that looked like relief. "You've been carrying these wounds like medals, haven't you?" she whispered. "Each one represents someone you saved or something you protected. You won't let them heal because that would mean forgetting the battles." The Sovereign opened its eyes and looked directly at her. In that gaze, Minji saw intelligence that matched her own. She saw wisdom earned through countless conflicts. Most importantly, she saw recognition. The creature understood that she understood. "I think," she said as she stepped back respectfully, "that you and I need to have a much longer conversation." The Sovereign settled back into its sitting position but kept its eyes on her. For the first time in 37 years of captivity, the greatest predator in known space had found someone who saw it not as a specimen but as a fellow warrior. The real communication was just beginning. 2 weeks had passed since Minji's first direct contact with the Sovereign. She now spent several hours each day inside the habitat. The massive creature had grown comfortable with her presence and even seemed to enjoy their quiet conversations. Minji discovered that the Sovereign understood human speech better than anyone had realized. When she spoke about her work or her past, the creature would tilt its head in specific ways. Different angles meant different responses. A slight left tilt meant interest. A right tilt meant confusion. A forward lean meant agreement. "You understand everything I'm saying, don't you?" she said during one of their sessions. The Sovereign leaned forward slightly, then nodded once. The gesture was becoming familiar between them. The breakthrough came when Minji started talking about her previous work as a trauma counselor. She explained how she had helped soldiers deal with memories of battle, how some warriors carried invisible wounds that hurt more than physical injuries. As she spoke, the Sovereign's behavior changed dramatically. The creature moved closer and settled into a position that allowed it to look directly into her eyes. Its breathing became slower and more deliberate. Most surprisingly, it began to make soft rumbling sounds deep in its chest. "You're trying to communicate," Minji realized. "These sounds mean something specific." She started recording the different rumbles and growls. Over several days, she began to understand a basic pattern. Low rumbles meant sadness. Higher-pitched sounds indicated memory or remembrance. Sharp growls expressed anger or frustration. The Sovereign was telling her its emotional state through sound. Hyun Woo became fascinated by Minji's progress. His military background helped him understand the warrior mentality that drove the Sovereign's behavior. "In the service, we had a saying," he told Minji over dinner. "You never leave a brother behind." Maybe that's what those scars represent. Battles where the Sovereign couldn't save everyone. That would explain why it won't let them heal, Minji agreed. Each scar represents someone it failed to protect. Healing would mean forgetting them. The next day, Minji tried a different approach. Instead of just talking to the Sovereign, she began sharing her own difficult memories. She told the creature about soldiers she had counseled who never fully recovered. Warriors who blamed themselves for losses that weren't their fault. The Sovereign's reaction was immediate and intense. The creature stood up and began pacing around the habitat. Its rumbling sounds became deeper and more complex. It was clearly agitated, but not in an aggressive way. More like someone who had been carrying a heavy burden alone for too long. "You recognize what I'm describing," Minji said softly. "You've felt that same guilt." The Sovereign stopped pacing and looked at her. In its intelligent eyes, she saw something that made her heart ache. The creature was in pain. Not physical pain, but emotional suffering that had lasted for decades. Sang-Ho Lee arrived at the station during the 3rd week of Minji's stay. He was a maintenance engineer with 20 years of military service before joining the research program. His job was to upgrade the station's power systems, but he became interested in Minji's work with the Sovereign. "I've seen that look before," Sang-Ho told Minji after observing one of her sessions. "During the war on Kepler 7, we had a unit commander who carried himself exactly like that creature. He blamed himself for every soldier we lost, even when there was nothing he could have done." "What happened to the commander?" He never recovered. The guilt ate him alive. He died believing he was a failure even though he saved more lives than anyone else in the campaign. That night, Minji had trouble sleeping. She kept thinking about the Sovereign sitting alone in its habitat carrying decades of guilt and self-blame. The creature wasn't just an apex predator. It was a leader who had lost the people it was supposed to protect. The next morning, she entered the habitat with a new understanding. The Sovereign was waiting for her in its usual spot, but something was different. The creature seemed more alert and focused than before. "I think I understand now," Minji said as she sat down facing the massive being. "You weren't just fighting random battles. You were protecting others, weaker species that couldn't defend themselves. And sometimes, despite your best efforts, some of them died." The Sovereign's rumbling became so deep that Minji could feel the vibrations in her chest. The creature's eyes closed, and it lowered its great head almost to the ground. The posture reminded her of a human soldier saluting fallen comrades. "You're not a predator at all," she whispered. "You're a guardian." The word seemed to trigger something in the Sovereign. The creature lifted its head and looked directly at her. Then it did something completely unexpected. It extended one massive, clawed hand toward her palm up in what could only be described as an offering gesture. Minji slowly reached out and placed her much smaller hand in the creature's palm. The scales were warm and surprisingly smooth. The Sovereign's fingers carefully curled around her hand without applying pressure. The gesture was gentle and respectful. In that moment of contact, Minji felt something extraordinary happen. Images flashed through her mind that weren't her own memories. She saw battles across multiple star systems, planets under attack by terrible enemies, and always, the Sovereign fighting desperately to protect civilian populations that couldn't fight back. She saw worlds where the Sovereign had arrived too late, cities destroyed before it could intervene, the guilt and anguish of a guardian who couldn't save everyone it had sworn to protect. When the visions ended, Minji understood everything. The Sovereign species weren't predators. They were protectors, ancient guardians who had made it their mission to defend weaker civilizations across the galaxy. The creature's wounds weren't battle scars. They were memorials to the innocent lives it hadn't been able to save. "Oh," she breathed, "you've been alone for so long, carrying all this guilt with no one who understood." The Sovereign made a sound she had never heard before. It was almost like crying, a deep, mournful note that spoke of decades of isolation and self-blame. Through the observation windows, the alien research team watched in amazement. Their instruments detected no aggression or threat responses. Instead, they recorded something unprecedented. The galaxy's most feared predator was showing vulnerability to a human who treated it with compassion rather than fear. Veltar's crystal body pulsed with confused colors. "The behavioral patterns make no sense according to our models." Crix's mandibles clicked rapidly. "The creature appears to be experiencing emotional release. This contradicts all previous psychological profiles." Thume's gas swirled uncertainly. "Perhaps we have misunderstood the nature of this species entirely." Inside the habitat, Minji continued to hold the Sovereign's hand, while the great creature processed emotions it had buried for decades. She realized that this was why it had waited so long. The Sovereign had needed someone who understood the burden of protecting others, someone who knew that the strongest warriors often carried the deepest wounds. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore," she told the creature. "I understand what you've been through, and I think there are others who would understand too." The Sovereign squeezed her hand gently and made a questioning rumble. "Other guardians," Minji said. "I think your species isn't extinct. I think they're out there waiting just like you were, and I think it's time we found them." The cosmic storm hit the station without warning. Alarms blared throughout the facility as massive chunks of space debris crashed into the outer hull. Emergency lights bathed everything in red as the station's shields struggled against the cosmic winds. Minji was in her quarters when the first impact shook the entire structure. She grabbed her emergency kit and ran toward the command center. In the corridor, she could hear the alien researchers calling out damage reports in their various languages. "Hull breach in Section 7. Veltar's crystal voice chimed urgently. "Atmosphere is venting. Power coupling failure in the main reactor," Crix clicked rapidly. Emergency backup systems are online. Debris field approaching from the starboard side. Thume's gas swirled frantically in its containment suit. Impact in 30 seconds. Hyun-woo was at the communications console trying to coordinate emergency repairs. All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Then someone noticed something that made everyone stop. The Sovereign's containment barriers had failed. The massive creature was free to roam the station, or to escape entirely. "Where is it?" Minji demanded. Sang-ho checked the internal sensors from his engineering station. "It's not in its habitat anymore. I'm reading movement in the outer corridors." "Lock down all sections," Veltar ordered. The creature must not reach the residential areas. But as they watched the sensor readings, they realized the Sovereign wasn't heading toward the living quarters. It was moving toward the areas with the worst damage, places where debris had punctured the hull and deadly cosmic radiation was pouring in. "What is it doing?" Crix asked in confusion. Through the external cameras, they got their answer. The Sovereign had somehow reached the outside of the station. The massive creature was using its own body to shield the damaged sections from incoming debris. Chunks of rock and metal that would have caused catastrophic damage were bouncing harmlessly off its armored scales. "It's protecting us," Minji whispered in amazement. The cosmic storm raged for 3 hours. During that entire time, the Sovereign remained outside the station, deflecting debris and absorbing impacts that would have killed everyone inside. When the storm finally passed, the creature was covered in new wounds. Deep gashes from sharp metal, fragments, burns from energy discharges, bruises from massive impacts. But the station was intact. Everyone inside was alive because the Sovereign had chosen to protect them rather than escape. When emergency teams reached the creature, they found it barely conscious near the main airlock. The alien medical staff stood frozen. They had tried to treat the Sovereign's wounds for decades, only to be driven away by violent resistance. Now it was dying, and still they were afraid to approach. "Stand aside," Minji ordered. She had grabbed the station's advanced medical supplies and was already kneeling beside the Sovereign's injured form. "Dr. Park, the creature will attack if you try to treat it," Veltar warned. "No, it won't," Minji said firmly. "Not anymore." She was right. As she began cleaning the worst wounds, the Sovereign remained still and calm. Its breathing was labored but steady. When she applied healing compounds to the deep gashes, the creature made soft rumbling sounds that indicated gratitude rather than anger. Dr. Yoon-young Choi arrived with additional medical equipment. She was the station's chief medical officer and had worked on dozens of different alien species. But she had never been allowed to treat the station's most famous patient. "The wounds are severe but not life-threatening," Dr. Choi reported as she ran advanced scanners over the Sovereign's body. However, some of the older injuries show signs of deliberate maintenance. The creature has been preventing them from healing properly. As Minji worked, she talked quietly to the Sovereign. "You saved us all. You could have escaped during the storm, but instead you protected us, just like you've protected others across the galaxy." The Sovereign's eyes opened and focused on her face. In those intelligent eyes, she saw something new. The crushing guilt and self-blame were still there, but they were mixed with something else now. Purpose. The creature had remembered what it felt like to successfully protect others. "These old scars don't have to define you," Minji continued as she carefully treated a burn on the creature's shoulder. "The lives you couldn't save are important to remember, but so are all the lives you did save." For the first time since its capture, the Sovereign allowed its wounds to be properly treated. Not just the new injuries from the storm, but the old ones it had maintained for decades. Under Minji's gentle care and Dr. Choi's medical expertise, the creature began to heal. But something more significant was happening. As Minji worked on the physical wounds, she noticed the Sovereign's emotional state changing as well. The deep rumbles of sadness were becoming less frequent. The creature's posture was straightening as if a terrible weight was being lifted from its shoulders. "I can feel it," Minji said to Dr. Choi. "It's letting go of the guilt it's carried for so long." "How is that possible?" "Because for the first time in decades it successfully protected someone. Us. The station. Everyone here is alive because the Sovereign chose to guard us instead of escape. The healing process took 12 hours. During that time, the Sovereign shared more of its memories with Minji through their strange telepathic connection. She saw the full scope of its species' role in the galaxy. The Guardians, as she had started calling them, weren't just protectors of individual worlds. They were defenders of entire civilizations. She saw the ancient alliance between Guardians and early human explorers. Humans had been one of the few species that understood the Guardian philosophy of protection through strength. Together, they had defended countless worlds from cosmic threats that would have destroyed all life. She saw the great tragedy that had scattered the Guardians across the galaxy. A war against entities that consumed entire star systems. The Guardians had sacrificed themselves to save billions of innocent lives, but the cost had been enormous. Most of their species had died, and the survivors had fled to distant corners of space. The Sovereign had been alone for over a century, believing it was the last of its kind. The guilt of survival had been almost as crushing as the guilt of those it couldn't save. "You're not the last," Minji whispered as she bandaged the final wound. "There are others. I can feel it in the memories you've shared. Your people are scattered, but they're still out there." The Sovereign made a questioning rumble. "And I think they're all carrying the same guilt you've been carrying. They're all alone, thinking they failed in their duty as Guardians." As the medical treatment concluded, something remarkable happened. The Sovereign's old scars began to fade for the first time in decades, not disappearing entirely, but changing from symbols of failure into marks of honor. Battle scars earned in service to others rather than reminders of personal inadequacy. The creature stood up slowly, testing its newly healed body. It was still massive and impressive, but there was something different about its bearing. The weight of crushing guilt was gone, replaced by renewed purpose. Through the observation windows, the research team watched in amazement. Veltar's crystals pulsed with excited energy. Crix's mandibles clicked in rapid patterns of scientific fascination. Thum's gas swirled with colors they had never seen before. But it was Haiyan Wu who said what everyone was thinking. "It's not the same creature anymore. The healing didn't just fix its body, it fixed its spirit." The Sovereign looked around the medical bay, taking in all the faces watching it. Then it did something that surprised everyone. It placed one massive hand over its heart and bowed its head slightly toward each person present. It was a gesture of respect and gratitude. When its eyes met Minji's, she saw something that filled her with hope. The Sovereign was ready to be a Guardian again, but this time it wouldn't have to face the darkness alone. "Are you ready to find the others?" she asked softly. The Sovereign's rumble was deep and strong. It was the sound of a warrior who had remembered why it fought. The healing was complete and a new chapter was beginning. The connection between Minji and the Sovereign grew stronger each day. What had started as simple communication had evolved into something deeper. When the creature shared its memories, Minji could see them as clearly as if she had lived them herself. Through these shared visions, she learned the true history of the Sovereign species. They called themselves the Kethmaran, which meant eternal guardians in their ancient language. For millions of years, they had protected younger civilizations from threats too dangerous for developing species to handle alone. The Kethmaran were not originally from any single world. They had evolved in the deep spaces between stars, adapting to survive in the harshest environments the galaxy could offer. This made them nearly indestructible and perfectly suited for their role as cosmic protectors. Jinwoo Park arrived at the station as Minji's research partner 3 days after the Sovereign's healing. He was a young xenolinguist who specialized in decoding alien communication methods. His job was to help establish formal communication protocols with the Sovereign. "The rumbling patterns are more complex than we initially thought," Jinwoo reported, after studying hours of recordings. "It's not just emotional expression. There are specific grammatical structures. This creature has a complete language." Working together, Minji and Jinwoo began to unlock the Sovereign's true voice. They discovered that the creature could communicate detailed concepts through combinations of rumbles, growls, and body movements. It was like learning to speak with someone who had been silent for decades. The breakthrough came when the Sovereign began sharing strategic information about cosmic threats. Through their telepathic connection, Minji saw visions of something terrifying approaching inhabited space. Dark entities that consumed entire solar systems, leaving nothing but empty void behind them. "Show them," Minji urged during one of their sessions. The Sovereign placed its massive hand on her shoulder and opened its mind completely. The visions flooded through her with overwhelming intensity. She saw the Devourers, as the Sovereign called them, creatures of pure entropy that existed only to unmake everything in their path. She saw the great war that had scattered the Kethmaran. Guardian fleets working alongside human military forces to contain the Devourer advance. Entire star systems sacrificed to buy time for civilian evacuations. Heroes of both species dying to protect billions of innocent lives. And she saw the current threat. A new Devourer swarm had awakened in the Outer Rim territories. They were moving slowly but inevitably toward the core worlds where trillions of beings lived, in ignorance of the approaching doom. When the visions ended, Minji was shaking. The scope of the danger was beyond anything she had imagined. "How long do we have?" The Sovereign's rumble was grim. Through Jin Wu's translation, they learned it would be approximately 50 standard years before the Devourers reached inhabited space. Enough time to prepare if the right actions were taken immediately. "The other Guardians," Minji said urgently. "We need to find them. How many are left?" The Sovereign shared more memories. Scattered across the galaxy were at least a dozen other Kethmaran, each one alone and probably consumed by the same guilt that had trapped the Sovereign for so long. They were the only beings in existence capable of standing against the Devourers, but they didn't even know each other still existed. Jin Wu worked frantically to decode the location information the Sovereign provided. "I'm getting stellar coordinates. These other Guardians are hidden throughout human space and beyond. Some are probably being held by research facilities like this one. Others might be living in isolation on remote worlds." The alien research team was struggling to process these revelations. Veltar's crystal form flickered between different colors as it tried to analyze the data. "The implications are staggering. Our entire understanding of galactic history requires revision." Crix's mandibles clicked in agitated patterns. "If these Devourer entities are real, the threat level exceeds all previous calculations. No single species possesses sufficient military capability to resist them." Thum's gas form shifted to deep purple, indicating extreme concern. "The creature's memories could be fabrications or delusions. How can we verify such extraordinary claims?" But Minji knew the Sovereign's memories were real. The emotions attached to them were too genuine to be false. The grief over lost comrades, the desperate determination to protect innocent life, the crushing weight of being the last guardian of the galaxy. No creature could fake such authentic feelings. "We need to contact Human Military Command," she told Hyunwoo. "They need to know what's coming." Dr. Park, with respect, they'll never believe it. A story about ancient guardians and cosmic devourers sounds like science fiction. Then we'll have to prove it. The Sovereign knows where the other guardians are hidden. If we can reunite them and demonstrate their capabilities, the evidence will be undeniable. Over the following days, Minji worked with the Sovereign to develop a plan. The first priority was locating the other Kethmaran and helping them overcome the psychological barriers that kept them isolated. Each guardian would be suffering from the same trauma and guilt that had consumed the Sovereign. The second priority was re-establishing the ancient alliance between guardians and humans. The Sovereign's memories showed that humans were uniquely suited to work alongside the Kethmaran. Both species understood the concept of sacrifice for the greater good. Both had warriors willing to die protecting others. "Your people and mine fought together before," Minji said to the Sovereign during one of their planning sessions. "We can do it again." The Sovereign's response was a complex rumble that Jin Wu translated as agreement, mixed with hope and determination. The great creature was ready to resume its role as protector, but this time it wouldn't face the darkness alone. Sang-ho had been quietly working on technical preparations. "If we're really going to mount some kind of galactic defense, we'll need massive industrial support, weapons platforms, shield generators, evacuation fleets for civilian populations. The Guardians won't just be warriors in this fight," Minji realized. "They'll be coordinators. Their knowledge of cosmic threats and defensive strategies will be invaluable for planning. The Sovereign confirmed this through shared memories. The Kethmaran had detailed information about devourer behavior patterns. They knew how the entities spread through space and what types of defenses were most effective. They had fought this war before and learned from every victory and defeat. As the planning continued, Minji felt a growing sense of urgency. 50 years seemed like a long time, but organizing a galactic defense would require decades of preparation. Every day of delay made the task more difficult. "We can't do this from a remote research station," she told the team. "We need to return to human space and present our findings to military leadership. The Sovereign will have to come with us." The idea of moving the Sovereign off the station created immediate concerns. The creature had been contained here for nearly 4 decades. Transporting it would require special ships and massive security precautions. But the Sovereign had its own solution. Through the telepathic connection, it shared images of Kethmaran technology. Ships designed to carry Guardians across vast distances. Weapons that could damage Devourers. Communication systems that could coordinate defenses across multiple star systems. Hidden throughout the galaxy were Guardian supply caches left over from the last war. Ancient bunkers containing everything needed to rebuild the defense network. The locations were locked in the Sovereign's memory, waiting for the day when they would be needed again. "That day has come," Minji said with conviction. "It's time to wake the Guardians and prepare for war." The Sovereign's rumble shook the walls of the habitat. It was the sound of an ancient warrior accepting a mission that would determine the fate of every living thing in the galaxy. The real battle was about to begin. The human fleet arrived at the research station 3 weeks after Minji sent her emergency transmission to military command. 12 warships led by the battlecruiser Harmony emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. It was an impressive display of human military power, but Minji knew it would not be enough to face the Devourers. Admiral So-Young Kang commanded the fleet from the bridge of the Harmony. She was a veteran of the Zilani border conflicts and had earned her reputation fighting impossible battles against overwhelming odds. If anyone could understand the scope of the threat they faced, it would be her. The Admiral's shuttle landed on the station with minimal ceremony. She brought a small team of advisors, including military strategists and xenobiologists. All of them had read Minji's reports, but none had expected to see the Sovereign in person. When Admiral Kang first entered the observation deck, she stopped in stunned silence. The massive Guardian stood in the center of its habitat, looking every bit as impressive as the reports had described. But what surprised her most was the creature's bearing. This was not a captive specimen. This was a warrior awaiting orders. "Dr. Park, I've read your files, but I need to hear this directly from you. You're claiming this creature is part of an ancient species that once protected the galaxy." "That's correct, Admiral. The Kethmaran have been fighting cosmic threats for millions of years. The Sovereign here is the last active member of their species." "And you believe there are others?" "We know there are others. The Sovereign has provided coordinates for at least 12 additional Guardians. They're scattered throughout human space and beyond." Admiral Kang studied the Sovereign carefully. Her military experience made her naturally suspicious of extraordinary claims. But she had not survived 3 decades of warfare by ignoring potential advantages. "I want to speak with the creature directly." Minji led the Admiral into the Sovereign's habitat. The massive Guardian immediately recognized the Admiral's military bearing and responded with a gesture of respect, one warrior acknowledging another. "This is Admiral So-Young Kang," Minji said to the Sovereign. "She commands the human fleet." The Sovereign rumbled a greeting that Jin Wu translated as formal military courtesy. Then it did something unprecedented. The great creature knelt on one knee and placed its right hand over its heart. It was offering its service to the human military commander. "It's pledging itself to our cause," Admiral Kang realized. "This is a soldier requesting permission to return to active duty." Through the telepathic connection, the Sovereign shared its memories directly with the Admiral. She saw the ancient alliance between Guardians and humans. She witnessed battles fought across multiple star systems to protect innocent civilizations. Most importantly, she saw the approaching Devourer threat in all its terrifying detail. When the visions ended, Admiral Kang was pale but determined. How long do we have? Approximately 50 years before they reach the core worlds, Minji replied. But we need to start preparations immediately. What kind of preparations? The Sovereign stood and moved to a wall panel that displayed star charts. Using careful claw movements, it began marking locations throughout human space. Each mark represented either a Guardian location or an ancient weapons cache. The Guardians have been preparing for this war for centuries, Minji explained. They've hidden supply depots and weapons throughout the galaxy. With the Sovereign's knowledge, we can access resources that no one has seen for generations. Admiral Kang studied the marked locations. Some of these are in heavily populated systems. Others are in unexplored space. Reaching them all would require a massive coordinated effort. The Guardians can't do this alone, the Sovereign rumbled through Jin Wu's translation. They need human warriors and human ships. The alliance must be reformed. Over the following days, the Admiral worked with her staff to develop an action plan. The first phase involved locating and recruiting the scattered Guardians. Each one would require careful diplomatic contact, since they were likely suffering from the same isolation and trauma that had consumed the Sovereign. Dr. Ha Newell Lim arrived with the second wave of ships. She was a specialist in interspecies relations and had been assigned to establish formal protocols for human-Guardian cooperation. Her job was to ensure that any alliance would benefit both species. The Guardians aren't asking for territory or resources, she reported after extensive interviews with the Sovereign. They only want to fulfill their ancient purpose as protectors. In exchange, they're offering military support and access to weapons technology that surpasses anything we currently possess. The alien research team struggled to adapt to their changing role. For over 2 centuries, they had studied the Sovereign as a specimen. Now they were being asked to serve as support staff for an interspecies military alliance. Veltar's crystal form pulsed with uncertain colors. Our research protocols did not anticipate this scenario. We have no framework for evaluating military alliances. Then you'll have to develop new frameworks, Admiral Kang replied firmly. The scientific study phase is over. We're moving into active cooperation. The transformation of the research station into a military command center happened with surprising speed. The Sovereign proved to be an invaluable strategic advisor with detailed knowledge of Guardian capabilities and Devourer weaknesses. Its input shaped every aspect of the defense planning. The first Guardian retrieval mission launched 2 months later. The target was a Keth Moran, who had been living in isolation on a remote mining world for over 60 years. The Sovereign insisted on accompanying the mission despite the risks involved in transporting it. My people have been alone for too long, it explained through Jin Wu's translation. They need to see that they are not forgotten, that the alliance still exists. The mission was a complete success. The isolated Guardian initially reacted with suspicion and aggression, but calmed immediately when it saw the Sovereign. The reunion between the two, Keth Moran was deeply emotional. Both creatures had believed they were the last of their kind. More importantly, the second Guardian brought additional knowledge about hidden weapons caches and defensive positions. Each reunited Keth Moran added to their collective understanding of how to fight the approaching threat. Within 6 months, 4 Guardians had been located and recruited. Each one brought unique skills and knowledge to the growing alliance. One specialized in energy weapons technology. Another had detailed maps of Devourer migration patterns. A third possessed medical knowledge that could treat injuries caused by entropy-based attacks. The human military adapted quickly to working with their ancient allies. The Guardians proved to be natural teachers who could enhance human tactical thinking with millions of years of combat experience. In return, human innovation and adaptability complemented Guardian knowledge in unexpected ways. We're stronger together than either species could be alone, Admiral Kang observed during a strategy meeting. The Guardians provide experience and advanced technology. Humans provide flexibility and rapid deployment capabilities. The Sovereign had become the unofficial leader of the reunited Guardians. Its successful healing from trauma made it uniquely qualified to help other Keth Moran overcome their psychological barriers. Under its guidance, the ancient protectors were remembering how to be warriors again. But the most significant development was the bond between the Sovereign and Minji. She had become humanity's first official guardian liaison. Her unique ability to understand and communicate with the Kethmoran made her invaluable to the Alliance. "You gave me back my purpose," the Sovereign told her during a quiet moment between strategy sessions. "You reminded me that protection is not about perfection, it's about never giving up." "You taught me something too," Minji replied. "True strength comes from caring about others more than you care about yourself." As the first year of preparations concluded, the Alliance was growing stronger. More Guardians were being located and recruited. Human industrial capacity was being redirected toward producing advanced weapons and defense platforms. Most importantly, the two species were learning to fight as one unified force. The Devourers were still decades away, but the galaxy's protectors were preparing. Ancient warriors and young humans working together to defend everything they held dear. The apex predators of the galaxy had found their true purpose not in conquest, but in protection. The Sovereign stood on the observation deck of the command ship, watching human and Guardian vessels train together in perfect harmony. Its wounds had healed completely, leaving only honorable scars. The guilt and isolation were gone, replaced by renewed purpose and unbreakable bonds of friendship. "The Alliance is reborn," it rumbled with deep satisfaction. "The galaxy has protectors again." In the distance, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, oblivious to the darkness approaching from beyond. But they were no longer undefended. The Guardians had awakened, and humanity stood beside them. Together they would face whatever came from the void. The greatest alliance in galactic history was ready for war.